It was just afternoon, and I was helping a customer choose a silk scarf in my boutique when my phone buzzed quietly. I glanced at the screen. A message from Mark. I'm leaving you. Flying to Miami tomorrow with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've emptied our joint account. Haha. I read the message as if skimming a lunch menu. No furrowed brows. No gasp. I smiled gently at Mrs. Peterson, wrapped her purchase in our signature silver foil paper, and carefully tied a ribbon around it. The only visible sign that my 12-year marriage had just been detonated via text was a faint tightening near my eyes, like a breeze rising on a sunny day. When Mrs. Peterson stepped out the door, I placed the phone on the counter and typed a simple response. Good luck. My name is Claire. I'm 38, and I had just received what might be the coldest breakup in history. But what Mark didn't know was that while he imagined me sobbing on the bathroom floor, I was calmly locking up my boutique, straightening the door handle, and pocketing my keys with a quiet smile. The signs had been there. Late nights that didn't match his paycheck stubs. Sudden changes in his phone passwords. The new obsession with hitting the gym like a college frat boy. Followed by buying tight-fitting clothes in an attempt to wrestle back his youth. 3 months ago, I found a dinner receipt for 2 at a fine restaurant, on a night he claimed he was working overtime. That evening, I opened a new bank account. A week later, when Mark suggested we combine our finances for simplicity, I nodded and smiled. By then, I had already transferred my personal savings into that new account. The joint account he had just emptied. It had just enough in it, 2 months' worth of scheduled deposits, to keep him unsuspecting. The rest, my savings, boutique profits, dividends, had been carefully separated. With receipts, statements, and legal review. Another message popped up. Don't bother begging. Melissa and I fly out in the morning. I'll send someone to collect my things later. Melissa, the new receptionist at Mark's office. I'd met her at the company's Christmas party. She laughed too hard at Mark's stories, rested her hand on his arm like she belonged there. She was young, naive, and she believed she was special. I didn't reply. I called my lawyer. It's time. The paperwork's ready. Want me to serve him in Miami? Not yet. Let him believe he's won. Another text. This must be hard for you, especially at your age. But hey, at least you have your little shop to keep you busy. I let out a short laugh. That little shop brings in double the revenue of his middle management job. It's a brand I built from scratch. Every dress, every order carries my signature. And more importantly, it has never, not once, touched our joint account. That night, I sat in the house Mark claimed he'd let me stay in until I found somewhere smaller. The house wasn't his to give. It was my grandmother's, left in my name, and despite a dozen not-so-subtle suggestions, I had never added him to the deed. I opened the drawer and pulled out a folder. Already prepared. Property deeds. Business licenses. Bank documents. My lawyer would love them. I flipped open our wedding album. Mark looked different back then. Thinner. Less smug. He hadn't yet decided he could replace a wife with a plane ticket and a younger girl. That version of him is gone now. In his place, a 45-year-old man trying to live like he's 25. Wearing shirts that hugged his softening belly, tossing around TikTok slang, and thinking the world could still be conquered with a crooked smile. I poured myself a glass of red, the good bottle I'd saved for a special occasion. And I thought, well then, the start of a quiet overthrow seems like an occasion worthy of fine wine. The next morning, my phone rang just as I was arranging the newly arrived dresses in the boutique. No customers yet, the door still locked, and as always, I wasn't in a rush. My lawyer was on the other end of the line. He still doesn't know. Good, I replied, my voice calm, as if we were discussing the weather. The longer he thinks he's won, the harder the fall will be. Mark still thought I was the gentle wife he used to know, the one who brewed afternoon tea and minded the fabric shop. What he didn't know was that ever since I found that first hotel receipt, I'd been on a journey of observation. No jealousy, no confrontation, just silence, recording every trace. Strange messages on his phone left on the dinner table. Bank statements with out-of-hours expenses. Work trips that didn't have any meeting rooms booked under his company's name. Each detail, I saved. Screenshots. Scanned printouts. A thick folder tucked neatly behind a box of silk scarves in the boutique's storage closet. No one expects the woman selling luxury dresses to be the one quietly laying down a legal trap. Thread by thread. Not because I'm suspicious, but because I've spent too long with a man who always thought he was smarter than me. That afternoon, Mark sent more texts. He seemed to be enjoying the illusion of control. As if he were directing my fate one message at a time. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Melissa understands me in ways you never did. You'll be fine, with your little shop. Each line was saved. Every word became evidence. Another stitch in the legal net I was gently, patiently drawing tight. He didn't know I'd long ago stopped reacting immediately. No arguments. No phone calls. No tears. Because men like Mark, they're not afraid of pain. They're afraid of exposure. Afraid of being dismantled by calculated silence. I spent the evening reconciling boutique accounts. Last month's revenue had increased 17%. 3 major clients were placing new bulk orders. The website was receiving out-of-state traffic. How ironic, the little shop he once belittled had become the very engine of my resilience. I once thought I'd share all this with him. But now I understood, not everyone deserves to be part of your dream. While Mark went to sleep wrapped in delusions of victory, I sat alone with my laptop, sending the complete dossier to my lawyer. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every breadcrumb he couldn't erase, documented. This wasn't revenge born from anger. It was a counterstrike forged in precision and preparation. I turned on the soft boutique light, warm amber spilling gently over the display shelves. Every dress, every handbag was my work. No one else gets to touch it. I took a sip of chamomile tea. And I thought, Mark, you thought my silence meant weakness. But I've been silent because I've been calculating every move. The message arrived while I was watering the hanging orchids out back. Just a short, breezy line, as if he were casually letting me know he'd picked up something from the store. Just used our joint card to book flights and a hotel. Think of it as a parting gift. Lol. No remorse. No hesitation. Just another one of Mark's awful jokes, typical of a man who thought reckless confidence could substitute for accountability. I set the watering can down, dried my hands, picked up the phone and called the credit card company. The voice on the other end was professional, but I could hear a faint spark of intrigue when I mentioned unauthorized charges and text message proof of using the joint account to fund a getaway with his mistress after draining our shared funds. She didn't need much else. The transactions were reversed, the account frozen, Mark's access removed. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't feel much, just the quiet satisfaction of pulling a safety pin before the blast. The next morning, I imagined Mark and the girl arriving at the airport. Tickets denied at the gate. Hotel turning them away. He'd scowl. Melissa would panic. Maybe call around. Maybe cry. Meanwhile, I'd be selecting a glass of wine to pair with my favorite cheese. The bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. And today, I thought, qualifies. That afternoon, another message came. You can stay at the house for now. Until you find something smaller that fits your new situation. I laughed aloud. He honestly believed he had the authority to let me stay in a house that my grandmother left me. With my name on the deed? For years, I'd gently declined his suggestions to add his name, just in case we want to refinance or buy another place together. He said that with such charm. But something in me had always said no. That instinct, today, felt like one of my proudest decisions. Another message followed, this one sounding more serious. I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a fair price for my half if you want. His half? Of the shop I built, funded, and ran myself? The one where I personally chose every fabric, every design, every label? The one he used to dismiss as just a little store. Saying I worked too much and didn't know how to enjoy life. He didn't just want to leave, he wanted to leech off what I had built to springboard into his next chapter. But unfortunately for him, in every incorporation document, in every tax form, in every business license, the name, Mark, had never once appeared. I took a sip of wine, savoring the subtle tannins and bold finish that tasted like power rising quietly in my chest. I didn't feel hurt, I felt ready. I opened my laptop and filed every new message into a password-protected folder titled Divorce Case. Each sentence was evidence. Each word, a puzzle piece in the story I would lay before the court, not with tears, but with logic, contracts, and law. The next day, my boutique opened at 8 a.m. as usual. But something was different, not because I'd flipped the script, but because I had controlled the storm before the winds ever started to howl. The sky that day was neither sunny nor rainy. The air felt still and heavy, as if even it understood that this was not a day for someone to win. It was a day when everything hidden would be dragged into the light. I arrived at the courthouse on time, carrying the file I had spent months preparing. No trembling, no panic, just a steady heartbeat, like walking into a final strategy meeting before a major project launch. Mark arrived a few minutes after me. His youthful makeover looked painfully out of place among the sea of neutral-colored suits and deliberate voices. Skinny jeans, a light gray blazer, slicked back gelled hair, and eyes that tried for arrogance but couldn't hide the flicker of uncertainty. Melissa didn't enter with him. She sat in the hallway outside, the cold blue neon light casting a pale hue across her young skin. The girl who had once been the bold punctuation mark in his breakup text now sat clutching her purse. No different from a student nervously waiting for an exam she hadn't studied for. The hearing began. There were no shouting matches, no dramatic courtroom explosions, just words, evidence, each sentence delivered like a scalpel, slow and precise, slicing away at Mark's ego, methodical, clean, and leaving nowhere to hide. My lawyer presented everything in order: bank statements, screenshots of texts, property contracts, boutique registration, the deed to the house in my name. She read slowly the message where Mark had boasted. I emptied the joint account. Lol. Every lol echoed through the cold room like a slap across the growing cracks in his arrogance. On Mark's side, things grew tense. His lawyer scrambled for a defense. My client admits to acting impulsively. But Mrs. Clare's actions, they were calculated. Cold. She planned everything to the extreme. My lawyer smiled slightly. You're calling the protection of personal assets excessive? You're calling financial responsibility cold. Then I believe a lot more women should learn to be cold. The judge lifted his head. His gaze scanned both sides with the weight of quiet authority. Mr. Harrison, he said, his voice not loud, but solid as stone. You admit to draining the joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a vacation with your girlfriend. Do you deny the messages read aloud? Mark shifted in his seat. His blazer collar tilted awkwardly, fingers tapping against the chair like a child bracing for punishment. I just wanted a clean break. No dragging it out. And you believe a clean break justifies breaking the law? The judge's voice held no anger, just quiet disappointment. Mark looked down. I didn't have to say a word. His lawyer made one final attempt. While the business is under her name, it grew during their marriage. My client has a claim. The boutique was established prior to marriage. My lawyer interjected, sharp as shears cutting excess thread. All financial records, income, expenses, contracts, are clearly separated. Not a cent from Mr. Harrison contributed. The only thing he gave was the label, Little Shop, and advice that his wife should find more balance instead of working so hard. Mark no longer looked at anyone. His gaze dropped to the floor. The confident man was gone. In his place, someone who had just realized he'd cut his own safety rope before leaping from a ship he never knew how to steer. The hearing ended without a bang of the gavel. The decision was clear. No negotiations required. As I stepped out of the courtroom, the late afternoon light spilled in through tall windows. Mark stood in the distance, no longer looking my way. Melissa had disappeared, perhaps unwilling to face the ending she'd once helped usher in with that gleeful text. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. There are victories that don't need applause. Only a steady stride, unshaken, upright, and fearless. I don't remember the exact moment I finally exhaled. Maybe it was when I stepped out of the courthouse, the soft breeze brushing past my shoulders. Or maybe it was when I returned to the boutique and saw my first customer of the day smiling at a red silk dress I'd designed myself. Perhaps it was when I tore down the wedding photo that had once hung in the corner of my office, and replaced it with a map marking the location of the second branch I was preparing to open. No permission needed. No approval asked. No apology for dreaming big. Mark once said I was too ambitious. He called the nights I stayed late at the shop an obsession. But if anyone stepped into that room now, stacked with fabric bolts, hand-sketched designs, prototypes, and orders from across the country, they wouldn't see a greedy woman. They'd see someone who no longer feared anything. Freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly, like the soft chime of the boutique door each morning. It's seeing my name in a local business magazine, not as someone's ex-wife, but as Claire Harrison, founder. The woman behind the city's most beloved boutique brand. Freedom is standing on stage at a women's business seminar, speaking about the importance of separating personal assets, reading prenuptial agreements, and trusting your own instincts, no matter how cautious others claim you are. Afterward, a young woman approached me, notebook clutched in trembling hands, eyes bright with something fierce. "You inspired me to withdraw my marriage application yesterday," she said. "I thought I was weak. Now I know I wasn't wrong, I just wasn't ready." Freedom is walking through the hallway of the apartment I once shared with Mark, and no longer hearing complaints about how late I got home, or irritated sighs at my papers covering the dining table. Now that space is my second office, where I sketch, plan, reply to emails, and sometimes simply sip tea in silence. Mark still sends scattered messages, some angry, some soft. "You ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you." I don't reply. I'm not angry. I just no longer have the energy to spend on words that come with no action. Instead, I fill out the application to open a third boutique, this one across town. In a rising neighborhood full of young women investing in themselves and the stories sewn into the dresses they wear. I ran into Melissa once, purely by chance, at a design expo where she was working as a media assistant. She saw me and looked like she wanted to disappear, but I simply smiled and gave her a small nod. When the event ended, she approached hesitantly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really didn't know." I placed a hand gently on her shoulder and said quietly, "No need to apologize. Sometimes, we have to touch what's wrong to learn what's right." That evening, I played the same instrumental song I used to listen to when I first opened the boutique, gentle, wordless, no climaxes, just like the way I had rebuilt my life. No promises from anyone else. No one else's blueprint. Just me, and the choices I made on my own terms. I sat beneath the soft amber glow of my lamp, gazing at my reflection in the boutique's front window. Not a woman who'd been abandoned. Not someone who had just won in court. Just a woman, living. Truly living, the way she chose to. The grand opening of my third boutique took place on a crisp autumn afternoon, just cool enough for the city's women to start thinking about wool coats and oversized silk scarves. More guests showed up than expected. Some were familiar faces. The rest were strangers, people who had heard of me not through scandal, but through how I built my brand, expanded my network, and kept my team steady during a volatile market. I stood in the new space, gleaming hardwood floors, warm lighting reflecting off every mirror, every dress rail, and I could hear my voice. Not from my mouth, but in every detail around me. Every stitch, every display corner was a quiet declaration: I don't need anyone behind me to stand tall. Not long after, I received an invitation to speak at a national women's business conference. I said yes without hesitation. Not because I craved the spotlight, but because I knew that somewhere in the crowd, there would be women like I once was, sitting in silence, clutching dreams that had been called foolish, waiting for someone to show them that women don't have to compromise to be accepted. In my talk, I didn't mention Mark. I didn't tell a divorce story. I talked about sleepless nights spent balancing the books, about the first time I failed because I chose the wrong supplier, about how my hands trembled when I signed the lease on my very first store. I spoke of sitting alone in the boutique one rainy evening, hearing the storm outside and asking myself, am I doing the right thing? And I shared that the only answer I needed in that moment was the steady thump of my own heartbeat. A young woman came up afterward. She didn't say much. She just showed me her phone wallpaper. The words, "Success is the best revenge." Italicized. Layered behind a photo of one of my boutique's red dresses. I smiled. And for the first time, that phrase didn't feel like a statement. It felt like a redefinition of recovery. Rumors about Mark still trickled to me. That he was living with his parents. That his former company refused to rehire him due to disciplinary records. That women from dating apps stopped replying after a few conversations. But none of it stirred anything in me. Because I didn't survive so he could fall, I thrived so I could rise. Melissa, the girl from back then, is now a regular customer. She's studying communications and runs a small consulting firm helping women entrepreneurs build personal brands. One day, she returned to the boutique, bought a handcrafted leather clutch, and said to me, with eyes no longer weighed by shame, "I used to be the girl fooled by illusions. Now I just want to help other women realize they don't have to be chosen to be worthy." I nodded. We'd both learned that lesson, in our own way. That year, I was named one of the top 10 most influential women entrepreneurs in the state. I didn't cry. I quietly returned to my flagship boutique and stopped in front of a single photo I still kept of Mark, not for nostalgia, but as a reminder. It was a screenshot of his final message. "At least you still have that little shop to keep you company." Just beneath it, I had framed a certificate. A record-breaking revenue award, my boutique chain's third consecutive year at the top. I looked at it and thought, he wasn't wrong. I did have that little shop. And it saved me, not because it made money, but because it gave me back to myself when everyone thought I'd break. Now, I walk without needing anyone beside me. And if someone wants to walk with me, they'll have to keep up. Because a woman who's learned how to rise after betrayal will never be pushed down again.